what's wrong is they forget their purpose for being there, and that purpose being to serve the people in our country and support and defend the Constitution. The first reception that I went to, who hadn't been sworn in yet, they bring all the new members of Congress in a few weeks before you're sworn into office. They call it freshman orientation, and you get your phone and you get a laptop and you get your ID card, and you go through a lot of ethics briefings and policy briefings. Yes,
they must be lacking on that nowadays.
It exists, I promise. But I remember going to this reception that one of the leaders of the Democratic caucus was hosting, and I didn't know until I got there that it was a reception where like every lobbyist in town was invited to meet the new members of the Democratic caucus, and there were 50 in my group of just Democrats. And so I got there and I was looking around and went to go stand in line to get like a soda or whatever from the bar. And this guy who was in front of me, there's like 20 or 30 people in line. And this guy was in front of me, he's like, "Hey, how are you? What's your name?" And I introduced myself, and he saw my name tag and it said Congresswoman-elect. And he's like, "What are you doing in line?" It's like, "Same thing you are. I'm waiting in line to get a drink." He's like, "Okay, let me tell you how this place works. You are now a member of Congress, and you will never stand in line in this town ever again, as long as you're in office." I remember that to this day because it really took me aback. And of course, I stood in line. I'm not going to, "Oh, well, thank you very much. Let me just go cut to the head of the line here." A few days later, I was running late for a meeting and went into the Capitol just on the street level, asked the Capitol police officer there. I was like, "Hey, this is where I'm trying to go. It's in the basement. Can you point me in the right direction, please? Because I don't know exactly where it is." And there's a woman. She said, "Yeah, sure. I'm going that way anyway. I'll walk you down." So I started talking to her as we were walking. And I told her, I was like, "This has got to be kind of chaotic for you guys because you're manning the doors. You've got a whole bunch of us who are new here and trying to find our way around." And she's like, "Oh, no. We like you guys because you're still nice to us." And I said, "What do you mean?" I asked, I was like, what are you talking about? She said, "Mark my words, in about 6 months, maybe only half of you will still be nice to us." Never forgot that conversation. A few years later, where my office was, you end up seeing, you have the same Capitol Police guys who are stationed at that specific post. And so I often would stop by, talk to him, like, "Hey, how's it going?" Whatever. I got to know him. So one night after votes, I was standing there inside the door, and somehow I forget what the conversation was, but I went back to this and I shared this story with them. And they looked at the door, they saw a member of Congress heading towards that door, and they were just like, "Stand behind the corner where you can't be seen. Watch this." Member of Congress walked in. They said, "Hello, sir. How are you?" Totally ignored. Guy just walked right by like they didn't even exist. And they looked at me and they're like, "See? People who..."
It's infuriating.
It is. And I'm going back to your original question of like, what happens to people when they start believing that, well, I mean, ultimately they forget why they are supposed to be there. That's really cuts to the heart of it. And whether they care about pleasing party leaders, or they care about being invited to fancy embassy parties, or they care about, pleasing their special interest corporate lobbyist donors, whatever the thing is, whatever the glittery object is that captures them, what's wrong is they forget their purpose for being there, and that purpose being to serve the people in our country and support and defend the Constitution.
Man, that's infuriating.
And I think that's where it's important to remember in so many ways that, the people that you see on TV, politicians, people who are elected into office, it's no different than you and me.
Yeah.
None at all. And so with that, we should set our expectations as such and hold each other accountable as such.
Well, I don't think there's any holding each other accountable inside Congress. I mean, just what I saw in my very limited snapshot exposure. I'm there every couple months for whatever reason, but I've been to a couple of the parties, and what I noticed the arrogance immediately, and some people know who I am because of the heights that this podcast has been to, and then others, I'll get introduced, and it's, hey, this is Shawn, former Navy SEAL. They could give two shits. Former CIA contractor, don't care. Ranked as high as number 2 on the podcast charts in the world. Now all of a sudden they want to be my friend, and I'm just like, fuck you.
Yeah.
And you know what? It seems to me that you always hear how it's the biggest, most elite social club on the planet or whatever. And I think that plays a big role into it. And what I've noticed is none of these people go back to their districts. They're supposed to be in their districts, talking to their people, figuring out what their people that elected them want, and then go back to DC and vote, right? Well, I don't think anybody goes, not very many, I shouldn't say anybody, but I don't think there's very many people that go back to their districts to be with their people to figure out what they want. They all stay in DC for the parties. Yeah. Nobody wants to hold each other accountable because it's the social club.
Yeah.
And they don't want to get ostracized off the island. Yeah. And so, I mean, am I right here?
Yeah, you are.
It's sad.
You are.
I mean, how do you even begin to fix that?
Exactly what we're talking about already. It is the system that's in place right now, and how many Americans have become, I don't want to say apathetic, because I don't believe that people don't care. Mm-hmm. I think people do care. And, even if it's about, people will say, well, I don't do politics. I don't pay attention to politics. But ultimately, you care about your family. Mm-hmm. You care about the place that you live, high cost of living, high interest rates, crime. I mean, there are basic things in our everyday lives. Is the trash getting picked up that people do care about? Well, those things that and people that we care about, like that is directly connected to those who hold public office, county, state, federal level, across the board. We have to turn that care into action. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. And it can be done, and it has been done, where people who are very rich and very powerful have been removed from office when we care enough to take action to do so. If we cede our power by saying, like, could never beat that person in an election, why even bother? Then yeah, of course they're going to stay in power. And so you look at how much of our politics, for example, is just us versus them. And this is one of the mantras that drove me crazy when I was in the Democratic Party, especially as vice chair of the DNC. I'd go to a lot of these different Democratic Party events in different parts of the country. And I often heard this mantra repeated over and over: vote blue no matter who. Telling people, turn off your brain.
Yeah.
Don't pay attention to what's really going on. Don't pay attention to what they're saying or what their record is or what they're promising that they will do. Vote blue no matter who. Us good guys, them bad guys. We have to recognize the responsibility that comes with being a citizen of the greatest country in the world. It's our responsibility And if we go back and we read our founding documents, we are reminded of that responsibility, that our government only exists with the consent of the governed. So if we don't like the abuse of power that's taking place, if we don't like the corruption that's taking place, we got to do something about it.
No matter where you're watching Shawn Ryan Show from, if you get anything out of this, please like, comment, subscribe, and most importantly, share this everywhere you possibly can. And if you're feeling extra generous, please leave us a review on Apple and Spotify podcasts.